Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm Matt Thomas. I'm the Executive Director of Paseo Project. And introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Contessa Trujillo. I work with the Paseo Project doing marketing and operations and programs.
And we're very excited to welcome Ben Allanoff, our artist in residence for the month of June, for a little discussion. As you all might know, the Artist in Residence program brings artists from all over the world to Taos to work on a community project centered mostly on a public art piece. The program is an opportunity for working artists to activate their projects within the community of Taos while exposing our community to new technologies, processes, and ideas. We're delighted to have the Lore Foundation as this month's sponsor. Thank you, Lore, for your continued support. And a special shout out to Revolt Gallery and Kathy Sanders for their support as well. So Ben's here with us from Joshua Tree, California. He works in a variety of media with a particular focus on large-scale outdoor art projects that engage the public as collaborators and participants. His projects are designed to connect people to one another and to the natural world. He has created public art projects in California, across the United States, Mexico, and Spain, and is with us here in Taos for the month of June for a 4-week residency, creating a large-scale installation at the Rio Fernando Park with Taos Land Trust. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, I'd love to hear. We're mid-month. We're about 3 weeks in now. Your project is already started. How was your time in Taos, Ben?
It's been really nice. The biggest surprise for me, or just thing I didn't really think about, was how friendly and welcoming and mellow the vibe is here in town. I swear, it's almost every interaction has been friendly and positive, and when people know or hear about what I'm doing here, it's supportive and interested in, oh, let me know, when can I come visit?
Yeah.
So it's been great.
Yeah.
And the weather's been really nice too.
Yeah, we've had good
We've
weather.
had fantastic weather. It's been hot.
Tell us, why don't we just dive in? Like, what are you doing here? Tell us more about your project.
Okay, so the project is, we're partnering with the Taos Land Trust on a property near the center of town called Rio Fernando Park. And that property the trust is restoring that property to traditional agricultural use and community involvement. And also there's a riparian area, a stream bed that's being restored, I'm sure over a long period of time, to a more natural biodiverse state. So part of that process is removing plant material that they don't want for whatever reason. And there's a lot of it everywhere on the property and in the country. And the particular species that they have that they want to get rid of on the property is called Siberian elm, which is very thirsty and not really useful for anything. So people value water. So I guess that tree is not, people don't want it around. And I don't know when it was introduced, but it was probably introduced via European colonization. I don't know that history exactly. But so what I do and have done in many different places is I work with land managers to help them remove the material, and then I use it to make art, like this picture. So depending on the area, it's different species. Whatever the species of concern is, if it has structural integrity, I can use it. But a lot of times it's more like, grassy stuff. I don't know how to make art out of that.
And is that what you're using for this project here in Taos, the Siberian elm?
Siberian elm, and there's a couple other things mixed in, but primarily Siberian elm. Yeah.
Wasn't there Russian olive? I remember you guys.
It turned out not to be useful. It's
Oh.
too mushy. I wouldn't build something in a public art project that I thought could easily break.
Right, and because also tell us a little bit more about the scale of this, because you talk about breaking, but we also have to talk about this thing falling over, and I know there's some structural issues, so tell us more about the size.
Right. Well, we can use this as a comparison.
Yeah.
Do you have your drawings too? Those would be great for folks to see if you want.
To dig around. They're there.
Okay.
So this piece is 40 feet. Our piece is 20 feet.
Okay.
And about the same height.
Yeah.
And it's not as densely woven as this piece. So that gives you a sense of the scale. This material is really light. The material that we're using, I mentioned the tree is thirsty, so it's heavy. So I had originally planned to build something that was vertical, But I was worried that it would be hard to make it stand up, to make it stable and safe.
Mhm.
So instead, I decided to tilt it and use props
Right.
to hold it up. So
Mhm.
now I feel that it's very stable, extremely stable and safe.
You mentioned the material. Let's talk a little bit more about that because you worked with Taos Land Trust and they gave a tour around the property and identified and showed you different places. And then tell us a little bit more about that process, working with the
Sure.
different young people and the groups to help
Sure.
select that.
Well, they partner with the Youth Conservation Corps, so I was very fortunate to have a crew from the Corps to help me cut the trees that Taos Land Trust had identified as, we want to get rid of this. So it's kind of like, where do the circles overlap? We want to get rid of this, but it's not useful to me. This is useful to me, but they want to keep it.
Right.
So we found enough material that worked both ways. And so I worked with them to cut that, and I'm working with Paseo Project interns to refine the material, to trim it, cut it to size, and do some other things to build the structure. I do these, often I do the structure by myself because I'm working with much lighter material, and as it turns out, this material is way heavier. I would not be able to do this without the intern, so
Oh,
I'm very grateful. Everything is kind of worked out well so far, like without worrying about it too much. It worked out. We trusted, right?
Good. We just trust the process.
Yeah.
It works out.
So I think that, there was something else I was gonna say, which was in walking the property, I noticed a lot of native species. So this property has had restoration decades, years back, I don't know when, but you can see where people had been cutting and planting before, but then they probably just stopped. So it's kind of cool that we're clearing stuff out and letting those species thrive again. A lot of it's about making it easy for those plants to get sun and water.
okay.
Right.
So we're clearing out the overstory, and the native wild roses will thrive.
Really cool.
There's a little actual like leftover rose garden behind the sculpture.
Oh, that you're discovering, uncovering.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
interesting.
So I had the interns go in and cut the Siberian elm that was coming up there, even when it wasn't useful to me because of this reason. I was like, well, we don't need those trees growing and crowding out the roses.
Mhm.
So we'll have a rose garden there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did you notice those when you were looking at different sites that you could build on and kind of choosing and determining which would be the best location for this?
Yeah, it was in that general early zone. I was at that point concerned with not cutting material that is valued, the species we're trying to encourage in order to make an art project. That's not what I'm about. So I was just making sure that we were over here and those plants were over there, and we succeeded in it.
So I want to go to a conversation that we just had before we started, which is the terminology we're using in the words. And so you had requested, and we both were really interested in talking a little bit more about this, not using the word invasive species. And so I think it's super interesting. Let's talk a little bit more about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before I was making art, I was the chair of something called the Topanga Creek Watershed Committee. And I joined it as a member before I was the leader to just like play outside and be with plants, because that's what I love to do. And very quickly, this huge issue arose where local land managers who were restoring were using herbicide to get rid of the invasive plants. And the community that I was part of was really upset because kids play in the creek and they didn't want these chemicals spread where the kids play. So I spent 10 years deep in this issue, and we don't have time to talk about all the things that I want to tell you about. But the bottom line, what I said to you a few minutes ago, was that what I learned was that the origin of the concept of native and invasive species is the same people who were proto-Nazi, even before there was a Nazi party, who were advocating for a pure Northern Europe and to keep the dark Southerners out, that they didn't belong there. And so there was native and invasive. And that idea was picked up by Monsanto, who saw a huge financial opportunity, business opportunity in eradicating non-native plant species.
Mhm.
So they took that concept. Bill Clinton actually signed whatever the big law was that authorized the federal government to allocate billions of dollars towards herbicide to get rid of these evil, unwanted, invasive, non-native plants.
Mhm.
If you think about what is native to a place, if you really think about it, every creature has moved since the beginning of life on Earth. Nothing is static, ever. The plants that are spreading are just better at living than the plants that are going away. That's been going on, through how many species have come and gone since the history of time. So we do like biodiversity. I like biodiversity. But to think that it's unnatural, that one species goes into an area and dominates, is complete fiction.
Mhm.
And it is used to justify the expense of billions of dollars to spread poison and poisoning our entire planet. So as the chair of the Topanga Creek Watershed Committee, it fell to me to solve this problem for the world. No, it fell to me to organize the community and lobby the land managers and the local government and get them to stop. And one of the ways and we were very successful in our tiny little area, but one of the ways that we did that was that we demonstrated the efficacy of non-chemical means of vegetation control. We're not going to get into all that in this talk, but there were all these projects where we were cutting mostly a plant called Arundo donax, which is a reed that grows by creeks, just kind of like replacing willow in that area, the same way Siberian elm replaces willow here. So we cut it, and we had piles and piles of it. And at the same time, for reasons we won't get into, I was starting to explore art as a part of my life. I was in my 40s. And what are we going to do with all this stuff? So I started building things out of it. And that's the origin of my new life.
Interesting. I was gonna ask kind of if you had already been creating art or if you kind of transitioned into and yeah, like where this kind of became your medium, your
It was just different things happening at the same time, kind of life changes and discovering a passion for this. And that, when I started making art, I was just screwing around, honestly. I didn't think of it as art. I objected when anyone said it was. I said, I'm not an artist. Those are really special people with magical
the
gifts.
hard thing to embrace.
I'd never conceived of it. And but the more I did it, the more it seemed like a reality that I had been unaware of. So I embraced it. And I make art with wire and with steel and found objects and smaller scale and bigger scale. And I'm not trained. I'm just letting my intuition do what it wants.
Along those lines, I know we've been in contact for months and months, I think maybe even since last year. How do you prepare for a residency like this? You're based in California, Southern California. But yeah, tell everyone a little bit more about sort of the process that you take before you even arrive.
Right.
And then when you do arrive, I know there were still a lot of questions that you had to figure out.
Wasn't too bad. I mean, the general concept we agreed on beforehand, which was I'm gonna cut the material with help and build something out of it in that park. So we had to figure we would pick which spot in the park, which we did when I got here. There was no way to do that from a distance.
Right.
And the other preparations were, so you can't see it in this picture, but there's a structural element under the weaving, and I tie it together with wire. And so I wanted to make sure I had suitable wire with me because it's not that easy to find. And so I had to go buy that and get it in the car and bring that and figure out which tools I was bringing and which tools I was borrowing. As it turns out, there's a lot of tools to borrow here, which was great because I didn't need to be driving with a car full of shovels. And other preparation, I've done a bunch of these, so it's not that much. It's like, all right, I trust. It was trust involved.
Yeah.
I trust there'll be enough help. I trust we'll find material that I can make something with. I don't know what I'm going to make. I don't know how big it's going to be.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be on the ground, but we'll do it.
Yeah. And then I was there with you, I think on the first day when you arrived, we walked around the whole park. You selected, I think, 3 possible sites and then you landed on one. Tell us more about that process of selecting the site for this piece.
Well, what I'm used to from working in the desert is having a site where the sky is the backdrop, and it sets off the sculpture really nice. So that was my first thought. We didn't really find a suitable spot for that, so I let go of that. And then the second priority was to create a space that felt, I don't know really the word for it, but like cohesive. So that when you were in that space, you felt like you were somewhere. And that was, for me, what made me pick the spot we picked. And also the land trust, that was by far the best one for their purposes as well. So obviously you're thinking about their needs.
Right. I like it because it's right along the pathway. It's between kind of the Taos Land Trust building and parking area and then the Fred Baca Park entrance on the other side. So there's a really nice
flow.
But I noticed that you looked at where the sun was gonna be in terms of construction.
Let go of all that.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Mhm.
Yeah, we talked about it. I mean, I talked about doing something with an astronomical element. A lot of the pieces I built are oriented towards the moonrise or an eclipse or the solstices, which we're having the summer solstice tomorrow.
Mhm.
And I thought that we would build something that could help us celebrate, and even after I'm gone, celebrate that. That's okay. We're not doing that. We've got something else.
Let's talk
So
about,
flexibility is actually the answer
Right.
to your question.
That's
Yeah.
true. Well, let's talk about kind of intention or titles, because I know you
Mhm.
kind of changed. It evolved as the piece evolves. Tell us a little bit more about the intention of this piece, the title of this piece, and where you're at with that.
So everything that we just talked about were kind of priorities as far as what are we gonna do and where we're gonna do it. But there's an undercurrent that I have in my work that I'm, was hoping we could fit in, and we can. And what I've been doing is a series of large sculptures like these that also function as a kind of community altar or shrine or gathering place. I can't tell you why. I mean, I could tell you why, but it doesn't really matter. It's more of a feeling that that's what I have to contribute to the world. I'm not sectarian. I'm kind of anti-sectarian. So the idea of creating a space where people can celebrate or grieve or communicate in any way, share, gather outside of traditional sects or beliefs or cultural backgrounds is very appealing to me. Very, very appealing to me. So there's that. So when I call it an altar, which is usually understood as a religious term, I'm not using it that way. I'm saying I'm taking that function out of religion and just making it a community place. And my thought is, that's my vision, but who knows what the community wants? Do they care? Do they want to do that? So this is like my gift, and do with it what you want.
You know what happens? Yeah.
Yeah. And people have asked, well, how long is it going to last? And I'm like, it'll last exactly as long as you guys want it to.
Mhm.
Because if you want to repair it and keep it forever, you can. And if it's in the way, get rid of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Something I liked in some of the statements you sent to us and just forming this relationship with Taos Land Trust, which was a really beautiful collaboration that fit so well in terms of your piece, your work, and their needs and the community needs. But I also like this idea of this piece and this project bringing people out away from their computers, away from their homes, and into these beautiful public spaces. Taos Land Trust, it's a relatively new piece of land for them, and it's a really exciting project that they're working on, and we're excited to be a part of that. And so what I loved what you were creating in the initial and what's being developed is sort of this space, this opportunity for us to come together, or opportunity to come out and be in a space and explore and get to know, whether you're helping to build it and learning more about these species of plants that are located in our area, the dynamics influencing their growth and not growth, and also learning places to just go and take a beautiful walk. Sit at the quote unquote altar and just enjoy space. So I appreciate that too. Sometimes art can just be a magnet to opportunities to just be present, just be there.
Somebody had asked me, why did they pick this? they were surprised. I don't know if it fits what you typically
That's
think.
interesting, really?
And
Yeah.
I didn't know the answer, but you just gave it,
Right.
and I love it.
Well, sometimes I think people think Paseo is all about technology and
That was the concept.
lights and flashing lights and projection. Of course, our festival is known for that in many ways.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, I think we also look at context responsive
Mhm.
and work that helps us see where we live. No
Yeah.
question.
And I think also thinking about, this idea with Paseo, with bringing art from inside out and kind of putting it in places where people spend time or gather and creating new opportunities and experiences around these public art pieces is such an important facet. And I'm curious too, I know that a lot of your projects are very community oriented. And if you want to talk a little bit about that, I'm just curious kind of how that fits into structuring and kind of also like the living and breathing of the piece and pieces that you've done historically.
Well, it's very in line with what you just said, getting people away from their computers, creating community. So in the digital age, there's online community, but I'm a more of an in-person, in the flesh kind of a person. So I'm trying to compensate maybe and create more opportunities for that. And then there's so much division in our world. And I alluded to that earlier. And so even in my community, there's populations that don't mix. And I don't think that's healthy, especially in a democracy. So I value creating opportunities for people to have an experience together. So sometimes they're building the sculpture. And so now they're having a creative, positive, low stress, fun time together. And I don't know if anyone's going to make friends for life or just notice that, hey, there's somebody who looks nothing like me and they're having a similar experience to me at the same time. So there's that humanizing aspect to it. And there's another aspect to it, which is I told you, I felt alienated from the art world just as a regular American. Like you go into the museum, everything's up on a pedestal, you pay $25 to get in. And the idea of making art that is more part of the fabric of our lives and that anybody can do. It takes, when I build the collaborative projects, I plan them so that there's no skill involved for their participation. They don't have to learn anything. And anybody can do it in a wheelchair, or we've had 3-year-olds and seniors, and it's an equalizer. That makes me really happy. I like it when the parents have nothing to say to the child as to the right way to do it. And if they try and say, there's no right way, just do it.
That's beautiful from an accessibility standpoint in all levels, and also like representation and bringing people from the community from all different facets and sectors and areas and communities within the larger community to collaborate in these pieces, which I always feel is such a beautiful opportunity, especially for our interns as young people who are kind of in this place of kind of figuring out their path in the world and allowing different experiences and opportunities to lend to figuring out what they're into or what they might be good at or are interested in, and also making connections with people out in the world who are
And
doing these things.
what art can be too, like
Right.
maybe they love to be outside and didn't realize, the opportunities that,
Right.
your canvas can be.
Well, so I give credit to Andy Goldsworthy for opening my mind to that. And that was part of my experience of playing with art in the beginning, not thinking of myself as an artist, but just giving myself permission. Was I want to be in nature. And he was like, oh, you can pick up these rocks and sticks and play and not mar the landscape. That's not graffiti. And that was a mind blower for me. So I'm not trying to follow in his footsteps in any other way than that. And like I say, anybody can do it. I went from feeling like art was for other people to a professional artist, and I want to empower other people, not necessarily be a professional artist if they don't want to, but to experience their own creativity.
Well, along those lines, let's talk a little bit about, we're keeping you very busy this month, and so we have 2 community engagements that are coming up. The first is with Twirl, our friends over at Twirl, and it's really open, it's free, and it's at their space. And there'll be interactive activities. You want to tell us a little bit more about ways people can get involved, or the project that you guys are working on at Twirl?
Sure. Well, it fits into that altar theme. I've done projects where I build a structure, and instead of adding sticks, people add strips of cloth or ribbons, and I provide markers, and they can write or draw whatever they want. So the structure in the end becomes covered in ribbons with personal messages from people. So obviously there's a tradition of things like that throughout the world, but not really in this country. So that's kind of a gap I'm trying to fill. So what we're going to do at Twirl, because we don't want to build anything that children are tempted to climb, we're going to build the structure out of string. And then we're going to write on ribbons and attach them. And if everything goes well, what the finished piece will have a design element to it that is organic to this place. It may just be chaotic and fun or something.
It'll be a lot of fun. So that's open for families and kids this Saturday, which is the 22nd. Anyway, it's all on our website. Check that out. And then let's talk a little bit about the very, very last day of the month, which also ends your residency here in Taos. We will have a community day in collaboration, co-hosted by Taos Land Trust, who's doing Soul Fest. They have some wonderful opportunities for workshops and other activities and Frito pies, and this is all free. And then Paseo will be on site with Ben at the installation, so everyone will have a chance to come out and say hello and learn more about the work, experience the altar, the piece. I hope we'll have a little bit of exploration. Maybe people can start making their own little piece too on site. And then we have some performances planned. Anyway, you want to talk a little bit more about
I have a concept for the interactive, for the art that visitors can do, and it's not what you just said.
Surprise, flexibility, right?
Yeah, your turn. We have some trees that we cut that were too heavy for the piece. I'm gonna cut them into rounds, discs, and have dozens, if not hundreds of them, for people to stack and play and do architecture with, like wooden blocks. So that'll be next to our piece. And then I have a unique musical instrument that attaches to the sculpture. And I will do 1 or 2 short performances on that. I tested it out on the interns. They dug it. And
They can be a tough crowd.
it produces a very strong response in most people.
Okay.
Or most people that have heard it.
Yeah.
And we'll be answering questions. And we're inviting other creative people to use the altar as a platform for their own performance.
Right. We're working with Dance Works. There'll be some movement and dance performance.
And the others are still a little up in the air. I've talked to some people that I want to talk to you about, and I don't know what it's going to be. It doesn't really have a theme, but it may evolve. A theme may arise.
Yeah.
But I thought it's a great way to dedicate the sculpture and celebrate the day and have fun and bring other people in. As we were talking
I love that. And that's Sunday, the 30th of June. And it's 11 to 2, but everything really starts at 1 at your site.
Correct. And I'm not really big on naming my sculpture. I usually do it in the most, like, if it's made of sycamore, I call it sycamore number 2. You know, not that I would use sycamore, but I'm just saying. So I have trouble with names. We're calling it altar. It's more of like a generic term for me. But if a name arises that feels really good in the course of what we're doing, then we can name it that. Let the community name it, perhaps. But the thing about names is they narrow people's experience of an artwork, right? So if I call this, mountains, now I've kind of told you that you have to see mountains, but it's not meant to be mountains. And if I don't say anything, you have the freedom to create your own title, name, meaning, experience. So we may leave it untitled. We'll call it Paseo Project Taos Land Trust, project number 1.
June,
Number two.
2024.
Yeah, that's where most of my titles go. at.
Well, this is great. Any other thoughts or questions that we want to ask Jen? Or
No, I was just gonna say that, I'm really grateful for the interns' help and for the YCC and all the collaboration. It's very, compared to my experience in other areas, very laid back, very loose, and yet effective. So,
Beautiful.
thank you.
that you are having a good experience.
Me too. I'm glad Taos has embraced you.
Yeah, yeah. And so we welcome everyone to come out to these events. If you're watching this after June 2024, take a stroll through a Rio Fernando Park. Check out the piece. It might be a couple months, a couple years, and it's an ever evolving piece in many ways.
Exactly.
Just kind of durational.
Yeah, if it may look really different down the road, we don't know.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.